Democrats have been making the argument for months, but as of today, the stakes are a lot higher as House managers acting as prosecutors are now officially laying out their case before the Senate.
We are here today in this hallowed chamber, undertaking this solemn action for only the third time in history because Donald J. Trump, the 45th President of the United States, has acted precisely as Hamilton and his contemporaries feared. President Trump solicited foreign interference in our democratic elections, abusing the power of his office to seek help from abroad to improve his re-election prospects at home. And when he was caught, he used the powers of that office to obstruct the investigation into his own misconduct. That cover-up continues today, as the administration has not provided a single document pursuant to lawful subpoenas by the House. Administration also continues to prevent witnesses from cooperating, further obstructing the House, efforts the President is no doubt proud of.
That last point was a reference to Trump's comments from Davos earlier today, where he seemed to treat the ongoing trial like a game and seemed to be bragging about obstructing justice.
We're doing very well. I got to watch enough. I thought our team did a very good job. But honestly, we have all the material. They don't have the material.
At least not yet. And there's no guarantee they will either, as the Senate won't vote until next week on whether to subpoena any witnesses or new evidence. And if that is allowed, the trial could extend a lot longer than some had planned, a double-edged sword for some Democratic senators, 4 of whom are also running for president. So while they hit pause on their campaigns with the first presidential primary contest just over a week or so away, the rest of the field is still very much out on the trail, including my next guest, former Governor Deval. Governor, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here. Part of how you're holding yourself out as a uniter, a healer, 11 votes yesterday, 53 to 47. 53 Republicans on one side, 47 Democrats on another. Is this divide bridgeable by you, by anybody?
Well, ultimately, it has to be bridgeable by the American people, right? We have to, as citizens, insist that at a time as Chairman Schiff said, as solemn as this, that our House members, our senators, remember they have a duty. And it turns out, you know, and I think you and I have talked about this before, it turns out that democracy depends on a whole bunch of unwritten rules. Rules like duty and decorum and restraint and respect. And, you know, we're going to have to insist that we are offered that by our candidates and by our leaders.
Can you imagine? I mean, a great joke at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, a friend of yours, Barack Obama, told when he said something like, years ago, obviously, he says, people say you should have a drink with Mitch McConnell. And Obama said, why don't you have a drink with Mitch McConnell? No, I'm serious. This is a guy hell-bent on one thing, ensuring there are as many conservative lifetime appointments to the court, and that whatever Donald Trump says, with very few exceptions, how do you deal? How does a president deal with Mitch McConnell?
Well, first of all, I think I have to credit Mitch McConnell because I think he understood what electing Barack Obama meant and what the impact it could have more deeply politically than many Democrats. And I think that's the only thing that can explain why, in the midst of a national emergency, he would say that the number one priority of the Republican Party was to make Obama a one-term president. And it's because President Obama had a gift in bringing people together and reconciling. I think at the same time, what I want to bring is some sharp elbows when necessary. And frankly, we got to go help unseat Mitch McConnell. Frankly, we have a terrific candidate in Kentucky right now. And as our campaign builds, I'd love to be able to go campaign right alongside her.
A candidate who on her first day said she would have voted for Kavanaugh to be on the Supreme Court until her advisors told her she shouldn't, and she reversed herself the next day.
And guess what? Guess what? Every candidate is going to make mistakes, is going to step on themselves, and that happens.
You know, I don't know if you've had time to see America's Great Divide, this fabulous Frontline piece done, came on a week or so ago, and I thought of this only because of what you said about Mitch McConnell in the meeting that first night, the night of the inauguration of Barack Obama. A ton of Republicans, maybe not so much in that room, but a lot of Republicans decided the best way to stop there are no red states and no blue states of Barack Obama, was the focus on the color of his skin. Racism played a huge part there, including by Citizen Trump with his birtherism.
Right.
Is there any reason to think that America is more hospitable to a black president in 2020 than it was in 2008?
Well, first of all, America elected a black president.
I understand they elected him, but he had a pretty rough go for a lot of those years.
And that may be, but that doesn't mean that we can't. It's very interesting that question, because I think we've been bullied so long by this president and by Republican leadership that we are beginning to question who we are. And it's one of the reasons why I've said over and over again in the course of this campaign, if the character of the candidate is always an issue, this time it's the character of the country. Let's call that question, because I am confident that if we do, we will see that there are more of us than there are haters. And while I'm convinced that all of the people who are haters voted for President Trump, I don't think all the people who voted for him are. And I think that's an important thing to understand.
Well, one other issue that's been raised since we're talking about Barack Obama, coincidentally, I didn't realize this till today, he said something the day after you jumped into the race. He was being interviewed by Stacey Abrams, who obviously ran for governor of Georgia. And he said, this is still a country that is less revolutionary than it is interested in improvement. They like seeing things improve, but the average American doesn't think we have to completely tear down the system and remake it. And I think it's important for us not to lose sight of that. Every pundit, one of my least favorite words, said that's directed to the Sanders and Warren wing of the party. He didn't say that, but that, I think, is pretty clear interpretation. Do you agree with what Obama said?
Well, I think it's true on some things, not all. But, we have a history of reinventing ourselves, Jim. It's one of the reasons why I talk about this moment being one not to miss. We confront the gap between our reality and our ideals, and we work hard to close that gap. It's happened a half a dozen times in our history, I think, and this is one moment where it could. And so I think what we need is a combination of bold ideas and humility, which is what I'm trying to bring. And by that I mean very ambitious agenda, very ambitious goals, but the humility to accept that others may have contributions to make, other ways of accomplishing those goals. That's how you get change that lasts.
But to do it, you got to get there. I asked you, Marjorie Egan and I asked you on the radio about a week or so ago, if you had to do, quote, I said, relatively well in New Hampshire, and you said, oh, yeah, yes, you saw the Suffolk Globe poll yesterday, still under 1%, 20 days to go. How do you climb that mountain?
The same old way. You know what I think what that same poll said is that some 51% of the electorate are undecided. I keep meeting people who keep asking me that same old narrative about being late, and I ask them if they've decided, and they say no, and I say, I'm not late for you. It's about you. You got to decide what you want. Other candidates have been out there for months and spent millions, in some cases years, and spent millions, and they have not locked it down. So we're working very hard. We're doing, I think, 35 events in the next 6 days, and it has been like that, meeting people, building as we go.
Are you concerned about the power that New Hampshire voters and Iowa voters have in this process? Neither are diverse states, neither are representative of the core of America. Yet I think it's fair to say if somebody wins both or even one, they're catapulted to the top tier. Is that how America should elect a president?
Well, I get the point, but the fact is that the president has to represent everybody, and every state and everyone everywhere. In fact, I would say one of the biggest misses today is that we have a president who only pays attention to the people who voted for him. So I understand the point about the momentum you gain and whether that momentum is, the right momentum. But the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, whether it's South Carolina or North Carolina or Iowa or Illinois, the president has to see everybody, and that is what I bring to this race.
Are you in the South Carolina race no matter how you do in New Hampshire?
Oh, yeah.
No matter how you do in New Hampshire?
Yes, Jim.
Okay, fine. What's the part of Trumpism, Governor Patrick, that worries you most in terms of staying power? I don't mean what's happening today, but even if Trump is removed from office or removed by the voters in November, or 5 years from now removed, what's the thing that worries you most?
Well, I might go back to something I said at the outset about how much of our democracy it turns out depends on these unwritten rules, and the fact that the president has a responsibility to uphold the laws and the Constitution, and then simply thumbs his nose at the oversight authority of the House is it ought to concern us, and the fact that we have in some cases judges who are willing to find every kind of way to permit him to do that, and senators who fall in line, although they grumble privately that it's not just a bad reflection but dangerous. That is a slippery slope we are on, and 4 more years of this, and I'm not sure that the democracy we have will be recognizable.
So, speaking of judges, let's talk about the top ones. Donald Trump has already picked 2 relatively young men who will serve through 4, 5, 6 potential presidencies. It's possible, as you know, the oldest members of the court, one of whom has battled cancer a few times, are also the most liberal members of the court. Steve Breyer from across the river, and obviously Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Assuming he fills that court with a long-lasting conservative majority, what does a President Patrick do about that?
Well, first of all, if the question you're asking me is whether we should expand the court,
that is exactly the question.
I'm not there yet. Persuade me. I've met people who are there, but we're not. A
conservative majority for 40 years. How's that for persuasion?
Well, I think. Look, I'm a student of history. We've been dealing with this for a very long time. I appreciate and I welcome the fact that the sense of being unseen and unheard is spread so widely in this country. But frankly, I've been feeling that for generations. And I have to understand, and I want you and your viewers to understand, that this is part of why we have to take the long view. The other side, the hard right, the radical right, have brought us to this point in terms of how we've treated our democracy for a long time, as if it would tolerate limitless abuse without breaking, the gerrymandering, the money, the vote suppression, the appointments on the court, because they took the long view. They decided bit by bit, with discipline, that they were going to remake America. Well, we're going to have to decide today whether the America we are is the America we have, or the America we are, the character we are, is the America we want to be. One that is about equality, opportunity, and fair play, and take the long view there. There's some short-term things we can do around policy and should do, highly impactful, but if we don't bring people in and build our coalition over time and secure that as the ideal worth reaching for, we're in big trouble.
See you in New Hampshire. Good
I
to
look
see
forward.
you, Governor.
Thank you.
Good
to be with you.
Patrick.